Hi everyone, just coming in to comment this because it seems a bit complicated for me to just throw it at you as a picture and not explain it or try to describe it. So the question is, how did Pembrokeshire's farm reacted to this new context and to these new way subsidies were shared between farms all over Wales, which meant that the most intensive farms in terms of output per hectare of land lost a lot. The problem is Pembrokeshire is focused on dairy farms, potato farms, beef and sheep farms. All of them are rather intensive in terms of output per hectare of land compared to their upland counterparts. It means that all of them lost some money in this redistribution of the first pillar, either a little bit or a lot, depending on whether they were able to benefit from the redistributive element of the new first pillar payment. In these different farms I did 6 groups from my farm archetype. I split them into 6 groups, 3 dairy groups and 3 beef and sheep groups, and we can see that we have a clear gradation in terms of number of animals, intensivity of the output in either category. But those who lost the most are the biggest one, the third group of beef and sheep farm, because of its very high head age historic payment, lost a lot from this redistribution of the first pillar. These farms had a very good first pillar payment before, and as it went to flat rate, they lost a lot, which means they had to adapt. But the question is, dairy farms that lost a lot because they're the most intensive in terms of output per hectare, was this the real mark, the real trigger of their evolution? If we look at the economic data from this group of farms as of today, as of 2018, we can see that there is a clear difference between dairy farming system and beef and sheep farming system. They don't have the same dependence at all on subsidies. Dairy farms depend a lot less, when beef and sheep farms have between 80 and 100% of their income per family worker that depends on subsidies. And it explains why the loss of maybe 30% of its subsidies with the redistribution for the third group of beef and sheep farm, the biggest, and the one with the biggest historic payment, was so dramatic, because its revenue was and is depending a lot on it. When you're faced with such a loss of income, there are several things that you can do. You can try to expand your business activity. It can mean being a bit more intensive, try to produce more out of your farm, try to have more output. But it can also mean try to get some more land, to get more subsidies with the acreage payment. So these are two very different strategies. The intensification of the production doesn't necessarily means that you need some land. You can simply go into having more input imported into the farm to increase the production of the farm. A very interesting thing is to look at whether farms were able to turn towards the second pillar of the cap to alleviate the problems linked to the first pillar losses. They were not. In Pembrokeshire, in lowland territory, the added values of farming system are quite high, and the use of the land, the output they get out of the land is quite high, which is reflected by the added values, which are quite good. And second pillar scheme as implemented in Wales might have some capital elements, but it's a conservation scheme, which means that you either have some outstanding flora, fauna or any historic element that might be worth taking your land out of production or within a special production pattern, but it will nearly always mean that you will lose some production out of it. And given the added values people get from the land, it's not worth it. So as a way to conclude this part, I would say that the one that lost the most might have been dairy farms, but the one that suffered the most were big beef and sheep farms that had a high stocking density, that were at a high historic payment. I wouldn't say the expansion move of dairy farm was linked to this change in the policy. Maybe part of it, but a lot of the way dairy farms evolve is linked to the way the market evolve, or in terms of input or output prices, because these farms don't depend as much as beef and sheep farm on subsidies to survive and to provide an income to their family workers.